Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something pretty intense, a source document that really aims to shake things up, challenging some core beliefs using language and history.
That's right. We're looking at 360 questions to ask a Hebrew Israelite. It's from Dr. Malachi Z. York, Holy Tabernacle Ministries, written around 94-95.
And its goal is, well, it's right there in the title, isn't it? It wants to provide counter-arguments based on what the author calls facts from original sources, Aramic, Sumerian tablets, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's a direct critique of Hebrew Israelite doctrines, arguing they rely heavily on misinterpretations, especially from the King James Bible.
And it says it's trying to reach, what was it, the elite few, the 144,000?
Yes. The message is clear. Bypass the teachers, go back to the original language because the foundation might be flawed.
Which brings us to that linguistic focus straight away. The author claims people are maybe afraid to question their teachers or the translations they're given.
Sort of a faith versus scholarship challenge, yeah. Question the language, you question everything built on it. It's quite a radical starting point.
Okay, so let's jump right in where the document does with identity. Redefining Hebrew first. What's the argument there?
Well, Dr. York pushes back hard against the idea some apparently hold that Hebrew means tribe of blacks. He says linguistically, that just doesn't hold up.
So what does it mean, according to the source?
The source insists the original term, Ibre, or Abir, isn't an ethnic name at all. It's a title.
A title.
Meaning to cross over, or one who traverses. It says this title was given to Abraham because he literally crossed over the Tigris-Euphrates rivers when he migrated from Ur of Chaldees.
Ah, I see. So it's about an action, a migration, not bloodline.
Precisely. It frames the identity geographically based on that specific event in Genesis 14.13.
Okay, that definitely shifts the perspective. What about the next big name, Israel? Does the document apply a similar logic? Is it also not a tribe?
Following that line of thought, yes. The source claims Israel originally just referred to Jacob's immediate kids, his children, not a whole nation or tribe as we might think of it today.
And it gets specific about when that name first appeared, right? Genesis 32.
Exactly. Genesis 32.28, the famous story where Jacob wrestles someone.
And the source challenges the usual translation of who he wrestled.
It does. Instead of an angel, which you find in the King James Version, this document points to the Aramic translation, which apparently describes the figure as a male living being, physical man.
Wow, okay. That changes the context completely from divine naming to something else.
It grounds it, makes it more physical. And then the document makes a really sharp point for you, the listener, about history versus scripture.
Which is?
That while the name Israel shows up thousands of times in the Bible referring to Jacob's descendants, the actual land or political state wasn't called Israel until, well, May 15th, 1948.
Right. So it draws a very clear line between the biblical family name and the modern nation state.
It really emphasizes that gap.
Okay, so from identity, we move into what feels like the core of the argument, this deep dive into language itself. Using Phoenician, Babylonian sources to find errors in the Bible, let's talk about God.
Yes, this is central. A major claim is that the English word God, singular, is often a mistranslation, specifically of the Hebrew word Elohim.
Elohim, and the source says that's plural.
Explicitly plural, yes. According to the document, in Aramaic or Hebrew, Elohim means these beings or these things. It suggests a group.
Okay, and you mentioned earlier the source connects this to the Anunnaki from older Mesopotamian myths.
It does. It's a pretty radical interpretation, linking the biblical Elohim directly to the Anunnaki, suggesting they were the original gods or messengers being referred to. The idea is that a polytheistic reality got sort of flattened into monotheism later on.
And the key piece of evidence for this plural reading is Genesis 1.26.
That's the main one cited. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. The argument is simple. Us and our are plural. Why use plural pronouns if Elohim is singular?
So the source argues Elohim refers to a council, maybe, messengers of a higher entity called El.
Exactly, a group of divine beings. And translating this collective as the singular God fundamentally changes the whole picture, according to Dr. York.
But isn't there a counter-argument? I mean, couldn't prioritizing Aramic or Sumerian over, say, Greek or later Hebrew be seen as its own kind of interpretative choice?
That's a fair point. The source doesn't really engage in a debate with mainstream linguistics here. It asserts the primacy of these older languages as holding the unaltered truth. It frames it as uncovering distortion, not as making a biased choice.
Okay, so the goal is to show the learner how the language itself shapes the narrative.
Precisely.
Well, if questioning God wasn't enough, the document goes even further and completely rejects the name Jehovah. That's huge. Why?
The reasoning is presented as correcting a historical mistake, basically a transcription error from around the 16th or 17th century. It goes back to the original Hebrew text, the Tetragrammaton.
YHWH, the four consonants.
Right. Yod, hey, wah, hey. And the critical point the source makes is that original Hebrew script didn't include vowels, or the little dots and lines added later to indicate vowels.
So, like reading BLDG and not knowing if it's building or bulldog?
Kind of, yeah. There's ambiguity in pronunciation.
Yeah.
You just have the consonants.
Yeah.
So YHWH, how do you actually say it definitively? The source argues you can't be sure.
Okay, so how did YHWH become Jehovah? Where did the J and V sounds come from?
According to this document, it was an attempt by later translators to make it pronounceable in their own languages. They supposedly took the vowels from the Hebrew word Adonai, Lord, and inserted them around YHWH. Then, crucially, they swapped letters based on European conventions.
Letters.
Yes, the Hebrew wa, which makes a W or U sound, got replaced with a V sound, and the initial yod, which sounds like Y, was replaced by the German J, which was pronounced that way back then.
So Y becomes J, W becomes V, add some vowels from another word, and you get Jehovah.
That's the argument presented, that Jehovah is an artificial construct, a documented mistranslation that appeared in English Bibles relatively late, and fundamentally obscures whatever the original name or sound might have been.
Wow. Calling Jehovah a centuries-old mistake based on linguistic shifts, that is definitely a challenge to established tradition.
It absolutely is. It underscores the author's intense focus on the material text and its transmission history.
All right, shifting gears from names and language to actual religious practices. The document critiques the Wailing Wall. What's the issue raised there?
Question 14 asks, pretty bluntly,
Mm-hmm.
where does the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, mention the Wailing Wall?
And the answer given is?
Nowhere. The source argues that worshiping at the Western Wall, as it's known today, isn't commanded in the foundational scriptures.
So what is the wall, according to this source?
It claims the wall people pray at is actually part of the outer courts of the larger temple complex, not the specific Western Wall of Solomon's temple itself, and that praying there is an innovation, a custom developed after the temple's destruction, not something mandated by God in the Torah.
Interesting. A custom versus a commandment. That leads into another point about commandments, doesn't it? The contradiction regarding images.
Yes, this is a classic point of tension. The source highlights Exodus 20.4, the commandment. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Very clear. But then it asks, why in Exodus 25 does God specifically instruct Moses to make 2 golden images, winged cherubim, and place them on top of the Ark of the Covenant?
Right. If all images are forbidden, why command the creation of these very specific, very sacred images?
Exactly. It presents it as a direct contradiction. It forces you, the learner, to consider, was the rule against all images or just against idols of other gods? Were images commanded by God for worship? Okay.
It definitely complicates the idea of a blanket ban on imagery.
It reframes the whole debate.
Now, this next point connects history, custom, and maybe even astronomy, the Hebrew calendar. The source makes a really surprising claim about its origins.
This is one of the most striking historical arguments, I think. The document lays out the Hebrew months, Aviv, Ziph, Sivan, Tammuz, and so on, side by side, with the months from the ancient Babylonian calendar, Tashretu, Araksamna, Kislevu.
And the point is that they're similar.
More than similar. The source claims the names are essentially the same. The argument is that the Hebrew Israelites adopted the Babylonian calendar during their captivity in Babylon.
Wow. So a fundamental part of their religious year, the calendar itself, came directly from their captors.
That's the assertion. It implies that this core element wasn't unique or divinely given in that form, but borrowed, transplanted.
And the source links this borrowing to pagan practices too.
Yes, it doesn't just stop at the names. It argues that adopting this solar-lunar calendar system also brought in associated practices, which the author connects to astrology. It even includes diagrams of the zodiac wheel, claiming these symbols were used.
And the proof point is a specific month name mentioned in the Bible.
Right. It cites Ezekiel 8.13, which mentions people weeping for Tammuz. The source points out that Tammuz is the name of a well-known Sumerian deity. So, a biblical prophet is referencing a month named after a pagan god, used within the Hebrew calendar.
That really blurs the lines between cultures, suggesting a lot more borrowing than maybe people assume.
It strongly suggests that cultural and religious boundaries in the ancient world were perhaps much more porous.
Okay, one last practice to touch on briefly. The food laws, specifically pork. What's the angle there?
It's about timing. The source questions if the earliest figures, Adam, Noah, Abraham, ate pork. It points out that the law forbidding pork is in Leviticus 11.7.
Which came after those prophets lived.
Exactly. So the argument is, since the law wasn't given yet, they would have eaten pork. It wasn't forbidden for them. The text explains the later unclean designation wasn't about inherent evil, but because the pig doesn't chew its cud, making it a scavenger according to the rules laid out at that later time.
So it puts the law in a specific historical context, not as an eternal, unchanging rule from the very beginning.
It contextualizes it.
So wrapping this up, this document, 360 questions, it's a relentless linguistic and historical audit, isn't it? Questioning the very meaning of Hebrew, the nature of God, the authenticity of Jehovah, the origins of the calendar, the application of laws.
It really is. And the entire critique seems to rest on one fundamental idea, that the oldest available languages, like Aramic and Sumerian, hold a more accurate, less altered version of events in theology, a version the author claims has been deliberately hidden or distorted over time, especially in translations like the King James Version.
Which leaves us, and you the listener, with a pretty profound question, doesn't it? Building on everything we've discussed. If these core religious texts, which the source notes are foundational to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, if they have been potentially altered or mistranslated over millennia, as Dr. York argues,
Then how crucial is it really to go back to those original languages? Do you need to understand Aramic or Sumerian to grasp the real historical foundation of these major world religions?
is theological truth found in faith and tradition? Or is it hidden in the untranslated nuances of ancient grammar and vocabulary?
It's a challenge to think about whether accessing history requires becoming a philologist, decoding texts thousands of years old, just to be sure.
A very challenging thought indeed. Thanks for walking us through such a dense and provocative source.
Absolutely. It was fascinating to unpack.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.